Good evening to all of you in Europe. Here, of course, in Los Angeles, it's 9 in the morning and a sunny day, and it's going to be hot. So the topic of feeling machines is, of course, a topic that is very dear to me for a variety of reasons, because I have spent a good part of my life, certainly the last 30 years, studying aspects of that have a strong connection to feeling, to affect in general. And more recently, I've been very interested in the intersection of this very fundamental aspect of our humanity, which is affect, with machines, and especially the robotics, that are almost characterized by the opposite of what we are. In other words, while we are clearly feeling creatures that have our intellect, our intelligence, our ability to deal with the world, very strongly embedded in the way we feel that world, in the way we feel ourselves. Robotics has been developed on almost the opposite premise. In other words, the idea that you can have an intelligence that is devoid of contacts with affect, devoid of the vagaries of emotion, for example, and that intelligence can almost be in a pure form. And this is both something that is advantageous. One can see why it was conceived that way and why engineering would want to develop machines that were not affected by affect. But at the same time, it incorporates a weakness, and we will discuss that in a minute. But first, I would like to, and by the way, the motivation for this more recent interest can be made clear in an article that we wrote last year. This at the very end of the year, we had an article in Nature, Machine Intelligence. I'm going to read you the title: Homeostasis and Soft Robotics in the Design of Feeling Machines. And the authors are Kingston Mann, who has been a student of mine and is now a brilliant scientist and slash engineer, and myself. And this is interesting because this paper that of course, we hoped it would be well received, but has been received with a lot of interest, indicating that there's something in this idea of joining these two very different aspects, the aspect of living with affect, with an intelligence that is embedded in emotions and feelings, and this world that has been engineered very successfully and that in fact does not have emotions or feelings, does not have affect, but still has a remarkable intelligence. And the very first thing that I'm going to say in this respect is to say that there's something already in the history of life on Earth that resembles this, and that can be called to the discussion at this point. And that is the fact that a very large number of species, in fact, the first species of living creatures, let's say unicellular creatures like bacteria, did not have consciousness like we do, did not have a mind like we have, but had a remarkable intelligence and have a remarkable intelligence. So we're dealing here with something, when we think about robotics, that has an antecedent in life itself. And that is that you can have creatures that behave intelligently, that sense the world, that respond to that world, and yet inside of them, there is nothing like our extremely rich mind. There's nothing like consciousness, which allows you to look into yourself and see how you yourself are functioning mentally. There's nothing like feeling, and yet there is what I like to call a hidden, non-explicit competence. And this is, of course, something that is inside a good computer that can give you, if attached to the right machine, can give you good robotics. And so there is this precedent or antecedent in life that does connect a little bit with what those manufactured creatures are. So let's start by some definitions, and I would like to tell you first about this world of affect. This world of affect, the dominant features are emotions on the one hand and feelings on the other. I think that it's worth spending just a minute to make the distinction. Very often, I'm surprised, although we have been insisting on this for a while, that people talk about emotions or feelings in exactly the same way, as if they were the same thing. Well, they're not. And here's the fundamental difference. When you think about an emotion, say something like fear or the emotion of joy, the first thing you have to think of is the motions that are attached to that emotion. Emotion actually is a very good etymology. It's all about movement outward. And that's exactly what happens when you have fear or joy. There's something in your face, there's something in your body that transmits to others what is happening inside you. And what's happening inside you is that in one case, you're cowering away from a danger, from an attack, and your face betrays it and your body betrays it. You pull back. In the case of joy, you sort of embrace the world and you move with your arms and your face, and all of that betrays that particular state. And the difference is, of course, huge, but it's a difference that is marked in movement. And something that is very important is that that emotion, or those emotions, have developed in evolution in order to accomplish something. What do they accomplish? They contribute in one way or another to maintaining your life and helping you with survival and the continuation of your life. And they help you by, in fact, having actions that either endorse what's happening at the moment, or countering what is happening. So in the case of fear, quite obviously, you do something against an attack, for example, against something that is dangerous to you. And by doing that, you are contributing to the continuation of your welfare. Okay? So back to this fundamental definition of emotion. It is not about something you see inside. It's not a representation inside you. It's something much more practical. It's a collection of actions. I like to call it a concert of actions. And of course, that is helpful and positive for you. Otherwise, it would not have been first generated and then adopted in evolution. When you think about a feeling, it's something quite different. A feeling is something subjective. A feeling is something you have in your mind. You say you feel fear, or you say you feel love, or you feel joy. And what it is a mental representation of what is going on in your body, in your overall structure as an organism at that moment. So think of the beauty of this. On the one hand, you have a set of actions, the emotions, that are just very practical reactions to the moment. And on the other, you have something that obviously evolved later, which is this capacity to have in mind, to have inside your mind, brain, nervous system, to have this representation of what is happening. So you say you feel sick, for example, something convenient for the moment. Here we are dealing with a pandemic, and what is it to feel sick? What is it to feel a high temperature, or to feel hunger or thirst or desire? All of these are feelings. So you have a representation of what is going on in your body at that moment when you're having either something that is necessary to regulate homeostasis, which is hunger and thirst, for example, or you have the representation of what you have when you are in fear or when you are in joy over something. So this is fundamental, and this is a world that is, of course, very, very rich in ourselves. As I say again, bacteria don't have feelings, but they have the beginnings of emotion. They do have emotive reactions to certain circumstances. And we have, and many other species before us, we have had the whole thing. We have the emotions and we have the feelings. And the feelings began as simple feelings about the regulation of our body, and then eventually they incorporated feelings of the emotions that we are having. Move to the robots, and what you have is sort of the emotive part. You have programs that allow the machine to do a certain set of motions, to detect things in the environment, to respond to what is wrong or correct in the environment. But you don't have an internal representation of that. So these machines, the conventional robotics, do not have a representation of their inner states. We don't even know what their inner states are. So keep that in mind. When you think about feeling machines, the title of the webinar, it's actually an absurdity when you look at it, because there's no such thing as feeling machines. They don't feel, they don't have empathy, they're not worried about us, they're not worried about themselves either. They are. And unless you take a sledgehammer to them, they're going to be fine. They live forever. They don't have to worry about this fundamental thing, which I'm going to talk to you next, which is homeostasis. Okay, homeostasis is a big word, complicated word, and many people say, well, what on earth is that? Well, that's the first word in that paper that I mentioned. And it has to do with the dictates, with the commands that have existed in nature about maintaining an organism alive through a variety of circumstances that go against it. So, for example, right now you have a very good case in point, again, with the pandemic. We have a virus, the virus gets in the body, and once it gets in the body, it attacks certain systems. And if the attack is too strong, and if there's not a counter response from the organism, what happens is that the virus will dominate certain systems. Like take the case, for example, of the COVID pneumonia. What you get an infection in the lungs, does not allow you to maintain proper oxygen levels, and unless you have a respirator, in the extreme cases, you are going to die because you don't have oxygen. So that is an extreme example of the dysregulation that can come to homeostasis if there's not a system of counterbalancing. Well, we as human beings are an example of constant in multiple systems to maintain our life on track. And they have to do with, for example, the bringing of oxygen into our lungs, the bringing of a variety of nutrients in the blood circulation, helped by the heart, which beats and moves blood in blood vessels, and then helped by a variety of other systems where quite prominently figure the endocrine system, which controls hormones that are essential for these processes, and the immune system, which is related to the endocrine system, but is much more specific in relation to creating very, very targeted responses for a virus or a bacterium that enters your body, and it creates antibodies to those creatures. But all of this has to do with homeostasis at the fundamental level. And once again, when we talk about emotions and feelings, we're talking about regulators or helpers of regulation with homeostasis. And if you really want my opinion on this, is that homeostasis is the most fundamental thing that you can talk about other than life itself. Obviously, the critical thing about us is that we are living and that we have an allotted time on earth to live and hopefully to live well. And homeostasis is the built-in system that allows that life to be maintained and continued and that helps us fight diseases. But it's not only that, it helps us find optimal arrangements in our day. So we're constantly being guarded and protected by our feeling systems because they're telling us, they're sort of sentinels. They are telling us whether things are going well or not so well. And when they do, they alert us to a problem and they allow us to correct the problem. So think of the beauty of this. If you, again, go back to bacteria, bacteria are very simple creatures, but let's not say ill things about bacteria, because first of all, the majority of bacteria are very, very helpful to us. We have tons of bacteria in our organism that are very good. Some bacteria are bad, of course, and create infections that are as bad as COVID, but the majority of them are in fact extremely helpful, and we would not live well without them. But these are creatures that have a sort of automated homeostasis because they don't know what's happening to them. They respond, they order something, they have a command, but all of that is happening again through the agency of this hidden competence. It's smart, but it's a smart that is not represented anywhere explicitly. When it comes to us, we not only have that kind of intelligence, which is very well expressed in this machinery that allows us to know what's happening in the body, but then we have a new layer which comes to the mind in the form of feeling, so that we are one leg up on these creatures, because not only are they automatically guiding our life, but then we can look at the life being formed and have the possibility to react. And even there, the possibility of reacting is sort of dual. There's one possibility of reacting that is automatic. So if you feel something like fear, or if you feel pain, your organism immediately does something internally, even if you don't want to do it or if you don't know what to do, and that will help the situation. And that's one interesting aspect of feelings and of affect in general, is that not only does it act as a sentinel, it's sort of a guard, you say, hey, something is wrong, but it gives you the incentive and sometimes even the mechanism to respond. So it's a guard, but it's an armed guard that is going to help you with the response. So that's one part. Then there's this gift that we have over and above the fact that you have those plain feelings, is that the feelings are instrumental in creating consciousness. And consciousness is about us knowing that something is happening to us. It's all about referring what is happening to our organism, to our integrated creature, which you can call by such names as the self. And when you do that, then you have a possibility of having a deliberation. You have a possibility of saying, okay, I can do this, and I'm going to do it consciously. I'm going to do it because I want to, and because I have knowledge that tells me that this would be a good thing to do. Okay? So this world of emotion and feeling, this world of affect that is completely absent from the world of artificial intelligence, is really something that we need to pay attention to, because it has to do with our human reality. And just as an aside, I'm sure there are in the audience, you have, I hope, people from very different specialties, very different fields of interest. But for those of you who are in the world of artificial intelligence and in the world of robotics, it's very important, because very often robotics and artificial intelligence and humans get to be a little bit confused, as if the intelligence of a machine such as we have today in general would be exactly like our intelligence. And that's not quite the case. There are many, many things that, of course, are similar. And there are many things in which artificial intelligence is not just similar, but much better than we are. Of course, I mean, we cannot compute things at the speed that artifacts today can compute, and that's good. It's a great complement to what we are. But the fundamental difference, again, comes back to affect, is that the machines are doing all of this in an affective void. There's nothing there that is vibrating and reacting to what is happening in the world. Whereas we, on the contrary, have our intelligence embedded in affect, because fundamentally we were first and foremost living creatures, and naturally we were concerned with, not concerned consciously, but we were concerned with maintaining that life. That's the mandate that we have. And it was only in the sequence of that concern with life that our intelligence is actually developed and flourished. And one thing that is quite interesting, and I leave that for you to consider, and that is that everything that has happened to us in terms of the development of our intelligences is in fact guided by the necessity, by the need to maintain our lives. So if we did not have the risk, the danger of being sick and dying, or getting into trouble, we would not have developed in our evolution the kind of intelligence that in fact we developed. So although it may look like your intelligent behavior is aimed at, for example, writing a book or solving a scientific problem or building a rocket or building a car or an airplane, it is in fact primarily aimed at solving the problems of your own life. And then it so happens that it can be applied to many other things. So you can become an engineer, or you can become a great stock trader and do wonders for your bank account. But all of that comes out of this impulse to do something to maintain life, except we don't notice it. So it's there are plenty of things that we do without knowing why we do it, as you can imagine. So let's see where we go next. After discussing this, just say one other word about homeostasis, is that, again, it's not something that is part of the preoccupations of artificial intelligence machines or robots, which are, of course, totally, totally neutral in relation to that problem. So the possibility of creating machines that would be feeling gives you something new. And here I want to talk about two things that are very interesting. One is that when you think about most robotics, you think about things that are very sturdy and that are made of materials that are durable, and robots don't get sick. I mean, you plug them in and they work, and if they don't have power, they stop. It's not that they die. It's not that they get sick. It's that they stop, period, because there's no way of bringing energy to whatever the machine is. What we think is that it would be interesting to have a completely different class of machines that would have some kind of internal state, which really means that the machine would be able to have an internal machinery, and that internal machinery could be represented internally and could work better or worse, exactly like happens with us, where our homeostasis can be respected or not. And then by having probes inside the body of those machines, we would have the possibility of representing internally whether they're working well or not working well. And of course, this would be a simulacrum of feelings, in the sense that it would be representations of their states, and these machines could be sort of happier or not so happy, depending, of course, on how well they are operating. And just for those of you who are in the world of technology and computation and robotics, for example, this is now a possibility which was not a few years ago because of the materials with which you can build robots. So there's a whole field in soft robotics, and they're new materials that, rather than being, say, a piece of steel or aluminum that is inert and unbendable, you have materials that are flexible, that are softer, and where you can embed sensors, and those sensors can operate a little bit like our interoceptive system. You see, when you look at ourselves, we don't see it, but everywhere inside our muscles, skin, internal organs, blood vessels, everywhere there are nerve terminals, and they are bringing into the central nervous system and into the upper brain, all the way up, they're bringing signals about how the body is at any point. And that's why you can have things like pain or pleasure, for that matter. All of this is being signaled, and the signals are signals that come in the nervous system. They're through the agency of neurons and chemistry, because actually the neurons that do this job are very thin and very old. They're the oldest of our neurons. They don't have myelin, for example, and they're open to the influences of chemical molecules everywhere. And there's an open influence, for example, in the blood-brain barrier, which is broken in relation to this system. So we have this system that is constantly collecting information and telling us how we are. And that, by the way, is what feelings are all about. And we want to create in machines something equivalent to this. Obviously, it's not going to be the same thing. We're not fools. But we think that it might be a possibility, it might open the possibility of creating a connection that would be different in relation to human beings. So you would have machines that, instead of just doing their thing robotically, which is our way of describing robot behavior, which is not like us. We criticize people who act robotically because they don't look like they have feelings. They don't look like they have human relations the way we like them to be. And so these creatures would be different. These creatures would be more, by being more concerned with themselves, they would have to be, to make corrections. They would be also a little bit concerned with you, or they could be concerned with you. So it's really a mixture of creating feelings about themselves and then creating something even more intriguing, which would be empathy. So you would have a generation of machines that would be empathic in relation to human problems. Obviously, there are two ways of reacting to this. There's a very negative way to say, why would you want that? You don't want machines that have some kind of feeling. You want the machines to just do their job and do it as efficiently as possible. And I perfectly sympathize with that. And there are plenty of machines that do that very well. But that's not true in relation to very complicated situations, especially the kind of human social situations in which we are, which could be very much helped by having some kind of reaction that give you sympathy. It would be a machine that if your phone call fails, the machine would say, "I'm so sorry, this really failed." And that would be coming out of a system of reaction to the situation that would have some kind of reality. And so I think that there's a way in which we can see positive developments here, and many people have seen them and are very intrigued by this idea. I have no idea if we're going to be successful at making such creatures. I suspect we are going to be successful, but it's definitely something to be considered, and something that is interesting also in terms of placing the discussion of what is human and not human. And the thing that I want people to remember is this: we are different, definitely, from machines. Why? Well, there are many, many reasons why we are different, but the reasons that stand most solidly in my mind have to do with the fact that we can feel, we can be joyful and happy with our health and with our good relations to others and our success, or we can be pained by either social problems or by disease. And that is a reality that is absolutely central to what human beings are. And if we want to have machines that are helpful, I think it stands to reason that some of them may be, very plain, without all of this trouble that evolution has invented for us, but some of them might be actually more complex and might have something that is a little bit like us, and that could come in handy in certain situations. And time will tell. If it doesn't, at least it's a very interesting point of discussion at an age in which we are completely in the hands of machinery, as happens right now. Here we are today, and you are there, and I am here, and you're in a number of places, and we are joined by this immense success of our technological capacity, and yet there's something that we can do to enrich this capacity, and that may be all for the better. And that's all. Thank you very much.